The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I have some sadly really disturbing numbers to give you about shootings in America recently. I told you, we did a story, I think it was about 10 days after the Las Vegas shooting. And at that point, a couple hundred people had been shot in the United States. And of course, with much less fanfare, much less media drama than the Las Vegas shooting. And I have some even more really sort of stunning but also depressing numbers for you today, which is that between the Las Vegas shooting that took place October 1st and the shooting at the Texas church that took place just a few days ago in Sutherland Springs, Texas, 4,319 people have been shot in the United States, and 1,385 of them were killed, okay? Between the two mass shootings, Las Vegas shooting October 1, Texas shooting November 4, Las Vegas, 58 people shot dead. Texas, 26 people shot dead, 84 people total shot dead in those two incidents. Tragic, horrible, absolutely sickening. But the degree of violence that we're experiencing is unique to the United States among developed nations. You really have to go to countries that the US doesn't consider really our peers to find rates of gun violence and gun death this high. And between the two shootings, which combined took 84 lives, 1,385 lives were lost in small shootings. And the victims are varied in terms of age, in terms of location, in terms of ethnicity and education, income, employment. A 22-year-old black woman from not too far from where we are, Pittsfield, Massachusetts. An 18-year-old Hispanic woman from South Carolina was shot and killed. A 54-year-old white woman in Arizona was shot dead. A 37-year-old white man in New York City. A 17-year-old Asian kid in Georgia shot dead. And why does this matter, right? It matters because talking about shootings as one thing doesn't make any sense. I've said it before and I will say it again. There are mass shootings, there are individual shootings, there are double homicides, there are suicides with guns, and we should be trying to prevent all of them. And the ways that we might go about preventing mass shootings, for example, are not the same ways we might go about preventing individual shootings, which of course kill way more people in total, but fewer people per incident. And that gets me to one of the main sort of fallacious ways that the pro-gun right thinks, or at least claims to think, about gun safety. No matter what proposal gun safety advocates make, right? No matter how well backed by research it is, no matter how well backed by data it is, you will have people who will say, hey, you know what? That particular method makes no sense because it wouldn't have prevented this type of gun violence or that particular shooting. That's not a reason not to do it. That's a reason to do it along with many other things. Yes, it's true. There might be some tactic or change that could be made which would prevent or make more difficult or less deadly mass shootings. But it's true that more than likely, the way to prevent mass shootings is not going to prevent gun suicides. That's a reason to do different things to prevent each, and not reason to do nothing. And this is becoming more and more common among the so-called gun rights advocates who appear in the media. Whatever you propose, they'll come up with a scenario and they say, hey, it wouldn't have prevented this one. If you do that, you wouldn't have actually prevented the Aurora movie theater shooting. He still could have gotten his guns or whatever. Oh, here's a way you could have prevented the Aurora movie theater shooting. Well, that wouldn't have prevented the Texas mass shooting because that was a different type of scenario. That just tells us there's not one solution. That tells us the problem is so deep and so ingrained in our culture and our society that there is not going to be one solution to fix the entire problem. That's a reason to do more, not less. It's sort of like when a regulation that is in place isn't enforced. The left says, oh, we've got to put more resources behind actually enforcing it. And the right will say, hey, see, I told you regulations don't work. Cancel all of them. It's fallacious thinking. It makes absolutely no sense. Here's a funny little story for a Friday, hilarious story, actually. The actress Mila Kunis, you might know her from the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall. You might remember her from that 70s show, or maybe stuff she's acted in more recently. I don't know what she's been doing. You also might recognize her more recently if you watch TV from Jim Beam commercials. Jim Beam is quite frankly a mediocre bourbon whiskey. I don't know too many people that would disagree with me on that, but okay, they hired Mila Kunis to do ads for them. And some of the ads are actually kind of clever and funny. And it turns out that Mila Kunis is also a big progressive. She was recently on the Conan O'Brien late night talk show. And she said to Conan on his show that she doesn't like Vice President Mike Pence's politics, so that she's been, I guess, kind of protesting. She's been resisting Mike Pence, expressing her disgust, I think is a better word, a better way to say it, by making monthly donations to the family planning organization known as Planned Parenthood in Mike Pence's name. Right? So she makes the donation, but in Pence's name to Planned Parenthood. And she said to Conan, I disagreed with some of the stuff that Mike Pence was doing and trying to do. And so as a reminder that there are women out here in the world that may or may not agree with his platform, I put him on a list of recurring donations that are made in his name to Planned Parenthood. People are now boycotting Jim Beam because of the donations that Mila Kunis makes to Planned Parenthood in Mike Pence's name. The anti-choicers on Twitter are apoplectic, trying to shame Jim Beam into dropping Mila Kunis as a spokesperson, threatening to or claiming that they're boycotting Jim Beam until they fire Mila Kunis. So far, Jim Beam, at least as of a few hours ago, Jim Beam has not commented about the controversy. I never buy Jim Beam. I never drink Jim Beam, but if Jim Beam did comment and defend Mila Kunis, I might be inclined to go out and grab a couple bottles of Jim Beam and keep it in my bar, just as a sort of show of solidarity. And here's the funniest part of the entire story. Some of the boycotters, I guess in an effort to be useful, are suggesting some alternatives to Jim Beam in order to make the boycott easier, right? They are trying to make it so that if you really like Jim Beam and you're worried, if I boycott Jim Beam, what am I going to drink? They're saying, hey, here's some alternatives. You can get Booker's, you can get Knob Creek or Basil Hayden, a bunch of them. And it turns out that a lot of the recommendations as replacements for Jim Beam are made by the same parent company that makes Jim Beam. How great is that? You go through all this, the trouble of boycotting and loudly expressing your disdain for Jim Beam over a political disagreement, and the recommendations you make for people who might want to partake are recommendations that put money into the exact same parent company. I love it. Are you boycotting Jim Beam? Let me know. I'm on Twitter at dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and we have a tremendous program for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Stephen Brothers. Stephen, thank you. Membership and Patreon are the #1 funding sources for the program. We really are audience-funded independent media, and you can join Stephen at davidpakman.com/membership, which is very, very much appreciated, particularly now that we're dealing with not only YouTube demonetization, but also the horrific ending of our Amazon affiliate link. We've taken some hits, but we are doing everything we can to recover that lost revenue. And patreon.com/David Pakman Show is the other place. Let's go to the phones. Let's start today with our caller from the 774 area code. Anytime it's 774, it could be Pat's friends. It might just be someone from Worcester County. We never know. But 774 caller, please announce yourself and tell us what your name is, your question today as well.
Hi, David. You were close. I'm calling you from good old University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
Very nice.
And my name is Roy, and I have two questions. One is slightly more important than the other.
Okay, go ahead.
My first question goes as follows. Do you think that American politics at any point in our future will come back to the actual idea of a marketplace of ideas as opposed to the popularity contest that has become nowadays, I guess?
I do not believe that. No.
No? And my second question is, do you think that there's any way that we can reform the current system to try and push it towards a more intellectual dialogue about the actual policies themselves, such as I've read about thought experiments such as blind or deaf elections, where you don't see or hear the face or the voice of the politician, but only their policies, base your ideas solely on them?
I doubt that we would ever see that, and I don't know that I would really push for that, but I think there's a couple different things that we could do. I mean, to go to the first question, I'm kind of kidding about just a flat no, but I think that in order to really get away from the type of politics that we've been going in the direction of, we really need to start teaching critical thinking at an early age. And by that, I mean probably by 7th grade, there should be critical thinking classes, and certainly in high school. And it should be these should be requirements, right? Now, the problem with that is that you have an element of American politics that knows that when you teach things like critical thinking, people move away from religion, they move towards science, they move away from the right, they move towards the left on so many different issues. So unfortunately, because we have a party that benefits from not thinking critically, electorally they benefit, it's going to be tough because you've got to get around them in order to start doing that. That's number one. In terms of elections, I've heard a couple different proposals. One of those proposals is not this totally blind thing you're talking about where you never hear the voice or see the face, but just read policies and statements. At least, and some municipalities have done this, nonpartisan elections. The candidate doesn't declare a party. The ballot doesn't list it. You run as an individual. So ideally, the idea would be you learn about the policies of the person. But of course, when you have a two-party system and when the Republican and Democratic parties are basically controlling the election process and funding these candidates, I don't know how you really get to that at the national level. Do you have any other ideas, Pat, for how we might push in the direction that Roy is suggesting?
Well, it's interesting because even hearing someone's voice could lead people to be influenced one way or another.
Sure.
So for the Nixon-Kennedy debates, people who listened to it thought that Nixon won, and people who watched it thought that Kennedy won because while Nixon sounded better, Kennedy just looked more presentable. So there's going to be biases no matter what.
No matter what, and I guess the counter would be, well, if you only read the statements, then you eliminate that. But then then there's probably going to be some bias towards the candidate who is able to speak most simply or something like that.
Some have better oratory skills, some have better writing ability.
Yeah, so I don't know, Roy. I mean, it's kind of depressing when you ask it this way because things aren't looking good, but those are a couple of ideas.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And you should come lecture at Amherst at some point.
Okay, yeah, I'll be there the day after Thanksgiving. I'm going to be lecturing there next. So, but anyway, it's just for a class. So unless you're in the class, I shouldn't even say what it is. It's not really open. But yeah, I'll announce that if I do. Thanks, Roy. Very much appreciate the call. All right, let's see who else is on the phones because there are a lot of people here waiting. Let's go to our caller from the 818 area code. Caller from 818, what's on your mind?
Hey, David. So I think it's fair to say that no matter what happens with the Bob Mueller investigation, Trump's approval probably won't dip below like 25 or 30%. Like no matter what happens, maybe a quarter or so of the country will just stick with him to the bitter end.
I think so.
So what I'd like to ask, what I'd like to ask is, even when Trump is gone, what happens to these people? Because like I find it funny to look at Trump supporters online, but I also find it kind of disturbing to see kind of like how easily exploited they are and how willing they are to be exploited by somebody as stupid as Trump. So, like, have we basically entered an idiocracy age in American politics? Like, is there going to be a Trump 2.0?
Well, listen, there's a couple different ways this could go. It's an interesting question. What happens to the Trumpist after Trump? What is a post-Trump world like for Trumpists? Do they just see it as the golden era? As so many ideological conservatives now see the 1950s, that's what we would like to get back to. I don't know. I think that there will be significant. I actually worry that post-Trump, you might see significantly increased levels of violence from Trumpists. That's one question.
Even if he has a successful presidency to their standards and goes out with 2 full terms?
Yeah, I think that after he's gone, if things don't go the way that they expect them or believe that they should go, that they might become significantly inflamed. I think that the broader question is, does Trump trigger, for lack of a better term, Trump 2.0, Trump 3.0? Does Trump legitimize the idea of sort of a clueless buffoon being a president? And that's the biggest concern for me, because I think the answer is yes. I think the answer is yes, because even with only 25%, you can basically, with 50% voter turnout, you can win an election with, I mean, certainly with 26% approval, even less if you get the votes in the right states because of the electoral vote system. So that's really the concern for me, the idea that now we are going to get Trump 2.0 and 3.0 and that it'll be an absolute mess.
Yeah, we can get President Ted Nugent or President Kid Rock maybe.
Yeah, and we're kind of joking, but not really. So yeah, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm not super optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, it really worries me to see people like, what's his name, Greg Gianforte in, I believe it's Montana, winning after, like, assaulting a reporter.
Yep, body slam.
And, yeah, in addition to just a dumbass rhetoric, it seems like there's a lot of people who revel in the violent rhetoric as well, and sometimes actions of these people.
No doubt, no doubt. And of course, you will always hear from them, listen, Trump has never actually advocated violence, which of course isn't true. He actually literally advocated violence and said he would pay the legal fees of people who punch protesters at events. But putting that aside, the rhetoric is also part of it, and we know that it has catalyzed all sorts of extremist groups with a lot of violence. Okay, thanks very much for the call. Appreciate it. Great to hear from you. We will go next to our caller from the, let's go to 575 area code. Caller from 575. If you can hear me, 575, tell me your name, where you're calling from, and what's on your mind.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Albers. I'm calling from San Diego, California.
All right, go ahead with your question, Kevin.
Okay, so Stefan Molyneux and other extreme libertarians have the idea that government is all bad because no entity should be allowed to initiate force against another in a fair society.
Right.
He believes that everything would be best taken care of by a completely free market once we got rid of government entirely. So assuming this society existed, what do you see as the biggest reason that a free market-driven, no-government society just wouldn't work?
Well, once you get beyond, so one of the big things that separates humans from other animal species is that there are animal species that are able to work together in large numbers towards a shared goal, but not in a flexible way, right? So animals that, like, for example, ants would be an example, or bees. They can work together in really large groups to build their ant farm, or whatever you would call it, nest. I don't know what the thing is called, right? Or bees I'm sorry, a colony, exactly. Or bees who can work, but they can only work together in really specific ways. They are not able to work together in large numbers in anything other than these instinctual ways. And then there are other animal species that can work together in more flexible ways. So, for example, we could think of the great apes or whales, for example, but they can't really work together in large groups, right? So the big distinguishing factor, the reason humans have been able to advance, is because we can work together in large groups, but also flexibly on making a building or organizing a society or government or creating airplanes or whatever the case may be. When you eliminate that by saying government is oppression, taxation is slavery, everyone just at every time needs to be allowed to do whatever it is that they want, you cannot get the level of progress that we have had in a literal sense, because you are making it impossible to actually work together in this way. Now, the libertarian will retort by saying, no, David, if the free market dictated that the best path forward, the most profitable path forward, was for humans to completely freely choose to organize and work together on some of the big projects that government would otherwise do, like road building or whatever the case may be, then they would do it, which then makes it a semantic difference because you're effectively forming a type of government. And as soon as one person doesn't want that, then you get back to the exact situation you're in now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It just seems like whenever you have a free market society, they always talk about how it would be perfect and everything would be fantastic, but...
Well, ask them to give you an example of where that's worked.
Well, it's never worked. That's the thing. It's the same thing with no, there's no true socialism, no true communism. It's never worked anywhere, so you can never point to an example of it, and, you know, Stefan Molyneux and all of these other people would say, like, well, they need to try it because it's going to be so great. Yeah,
well, check out, by the way, check out our video. Check out our video, Kevin. Socialism has never worked, debunked, because it's not...
I have read that, or I have watched that.
Okay, all right, good. All right, Kevin, thanks very much. Appreciate the call.
Yep, thanks for talking to me.
Okay, no problem. 617-830-4750. Let's see who's next on the line. How about the 813 area code? Caller from 813. Introduce yourself. Tell us what's on your mind today.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy, and I'm from Tampa. I have my question.
Okay, Jeremy, you're breaking up. We may be on speaker. You may be covering the phone microphone with a piece of paper or something. So let's see if we can get reset here. I'd love to hear your question. Right, that's what I thought.
You lost them?
Yeah, it was clearly not a good situation there. It was right away I could tell that one wasn't going to go particularly well. Let's go and take a call from Skype. Caller who is calling in via Skype, please tell us who you are and what's on your mind.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, hi. My name's Riddick. Yeah, I'm calling from the United Arab Emirates. My phone wasn't working, so I called via Skype.
Very good.
My question is, would you support a woman's right to choose an abortion, even if it's for, terrible reasons? For example, would you be okay with a woman wanting the race of her baby tested, hypothetically, if it was ambiguous who the father was, and wanting it aborted if the baby was black? Because at first I was thinking there's no reason to allow an abortion because she's still fine with the baby being inside her. She's just concerned about the cosmetics. But, I'm also less offended about a woman choosing to abort a baby with Down syndrome, for example. So do you think it's inconsistent to not support women aborting babies based on race? Or please?
So there's a couple different things here. One is whether the technology would allow doing what it is that you're looking to do. And then a second thing
let's hypothetically say it would, yeah?
Let's say it would, right. So let's say it would for a second. You're asking about whether it should be allowed legally. It sounds horrible to say, hey, listen, let's allow women. First of all, how likely is it? It's not very common that a woman would be pregnant and have no idea what the race of the baby inside of her even is, right? So we have to sort of suspend disbelief even to address this question. You agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with saying it's illegal to ask for a woman to abort a baby based on race preferences is that you don't have to ask women. In order to know that, you need to demand a reason for the abortion. And that's just not the way it works. If you support a right to choose, what matters is, are you procuring a safe and legal abortion based on the law that's there, based on restrictions in terms of when in the pregnancy you either are or aren't allowed to seek an abortion, and that's it. So in order to do what you're saying, you need to have a system where the provider asks what the reason is, and that's hugely problematic, and it's not something that's part of the law right now.
Yeah, it would be pretty difficult to also ensure that the reason was valid as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think that it's an unanswerable question, because there are no reasonable circumstances in which anybody would ever know that of people who are seeking abortions, right,
and you
Pat?
can always just make up a reason.
You could always lie, too, right? What would the point be of even saying that? Because you can always lie.
That was my point. But, I guess if it could somehow be proven, and we could ask another short question.
Sure, go ahead.
Do you think Mike Pence would be a better president than Trump?
Well, I think that he would be less scandalous, but he would be far more effective in terms of pushing an authoritarian, ideological right-wing agenda. I've talked about that before, though, so check out some of my videos on that.
I have.
Okay, great to hear from the UAE. What's it like living there, by the way, anyway?
By the way, I was the guy who posted on Reddit about your hair the other day, back then, so...
About 5,000 people posted online about my hair because it was so crazy. So I don't know offhand which one you were, but...
I posted the picture of your hair from a couple years ago.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah. My helmet
hair.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
It's pretty good in Dubai. I'm actually an American, like Indian ethnically. But yeah, it's great in Dubai. All right.
You're ethnically an American. That's interesting. What ethnicity is that?
Sorry, no, I'm ethnically... Sorry, did I say ethnically American? I mean, I'm ethnically an Indian, but I have an American citizenship.
Oh, I got you.
But I'm living as an expat in Dubai.
Gotcha.
As a student. All right. Thanks,
and are you allowed to drink alcohol there?
Yeah, it's very liberal here, actually. Very liberal.
Is.
They're not very kind to the locals if they drink alcohol or stuff, but expats are basically not subject to this.
Okay, very good.
But I'm underage anyway.
So you're not drinking anyway, of course, right? Why would I ever even imply that? All right, thank you so much for the call. Very, very much appreciate it. Let's take a break. We'll be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, let's go back to the phone. 617-830-4750 is the number. We'll go to our next caller from the 503 area code. Caller, what's on your mind?
Hi, David. My name is Mitchell Forbes. I'm from, crap, I just gave my last name. I'm from Portland, and I have a question about the no Russian trolls that come on your show and they leave voicemails.
Okay. The people that call in and still say, despite indictments, that there's no Russia story.
Yes.
Please tell us we're not on speakerphone, right? Right, Mitchell?
Sorry, let me take you off.
Yeah, thank you. Got to know the etiquette when you call into shows, you know?
Taking a long time.
Yeah.
All right.
It's quite a speaker system you got. Okay, go ahead.
I had a question behind why you call them trolls still when Secular Talk, Humanist Report, The Progressive Voice, and the Jimmy Dore Show still say that there doesn't seem to be any evidence between Russia and Trump.
I don't know that they say that. I mean, listen, I don't really watch any shows, and I don't even know some of the people you're talking about. But is there a different way you can ask the question that I might be able to better answer it? Because I don't know all those shows, and I don't really watch any shows.
It's just calling them trolls, and then when there's a lot of prominent progressive voices out there that are also independent media, just like yours, it's a little strange. The only other independent media source is very progressive that I found that agrees that there could be a collusion is the Rational National, and even then,
I don't know who that is either. Listen, I mean, right. it's so difficult to talk about what other people think whose shows I've not seen for a while, and some of whom I'm not even familiar with. I mean, do you think that there was Trump-Russia collusion? Do you think it's possible that there was? Do you think it's been proven that there is no collusion?
I don't think it's been proven either way.
Right.
But from the evidence that's been mounted so far, I don't believe it is the case that there has been collusion.
Okay. So like when Donald Trump Jr. met with the Russian lawyer, and she promised dirt on Hillary, and Trump Jr. said, we might be able to look at, I want more information about this. And if we win, we might be able to look at changing the Magnitsky law, which is like a pretty clear intimation into a quid pro quo. You help us defeat Hillary, we might change the Magnitsky law. Would that qualify? Because remember, collusion's not a legal term. Collusion is an umbrella term that it can include a lot of different crimes. Would that be an example, maybe?
I would have to know more about that specific case.
But if it's as I describe it, would that be an example?
If there's no definition, then potentially, yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying is that there's actually a very specific way, at least one that I've named just in the last 30 seconds, that would qualify as Trump-Russia collusion.
Well, that was Trump's son.
I'm sorry?
Not Trump. That was not Trump himself. That was Trump's son.
So let's define terms. Is your statement, is your assertion that unless Donald Trump personally was the one doing the collusion, that there was no Trump-Russia collusion? Is that the idea that when we say Trump, we have to mean Donald Trump personally? I'm just trying to figure out what your expectations are.
No, I'm saying that, sorry about the coughing. I'm saying that I don't believe there's evidence, enough evidence to say that there has been Trump-Russia collusion. And quite frankly, it doesn't seem like we're getting closer to it.
In what way aren't we getting closer? Like we used to have no investigation. Then we got an investigation. Then we got 3 indictments. One of those indictments has become a guilty plea. Michael Flynn is about to be indicted. We just learned that Donald Trump Jr. appeared to have offered a quid pro quo to change a law that Russia wants changed in exchange for damaging information about Hillary Clinton. So how are we, aren't we getting, are those steps away from collusion or towards collusion?
Well, what about Syria? And
no, but hold on, forget about Syria for now. Syria has nothing to do with this. Are the steps I've outlined, are they moving us in the direction of collusion or are they moving us away from collusion?
I mean, we still have major sanctions on Russia. I mean, even if we do small things that improve our relationship with foreign nations, it doesn't show a direct collusion between Trump and Russia.
But you're not answering my question. What I'm asking is, from where we started 9 months ago to where we are now, have we moved in the direction of getting away from a possible collusion, or have we moved towards possible collusion?
We've not really gone anywhere. Just because there's an investigation going on, and just because there's indictment with money fraud and
but you would say this, so then you would say it no matter what, right? No matter what, even if we had a dozen indictments. Let me put it a different way, okay? Here's where I think we're going to get where the rubber meets the road. What would you need to see to believe that there was collusion?
Like actual, like actual evidence of Trump-Russia collusion.
And what would be an example of that?
Like direct documents that show that Trump was colluding with Russia knowingly.
Trump personally, or people that were running Trump's campaign, people possibly directed by Trump? What do you mean?
I see your point, David. I did not call into the show prepared to answer that question.
Well, let me put it a different way. Is there anything that would convince you that Trump colluded with Russia? Because I've given you plenty of opportunities to tell me exactly why you don't think what we've seen points in that direction. I've given you an open forum to tell me what, if I could present it to you, would change your mind, and you're unable to tell me. So is it possible that you've decided already that there was no collusion and you're not really open to having your mind changed?
No.
That's not possible.
I see a very similar perspective, only on the opposite end of what you're coming at.
No. Listen, it's abundantly clear that you have a different perspective. My question is, it doesn't sound like you're actually open to having your mind changed, because I've asked you what would change your mind and you haven't been able to tell me.
Like actual evidence between like the actual concrete evidence, not just.
But what would that be? Like, do you need a video of Trump and Putin doing something? I mean, like, what would be that evidence?
There just hasn't been any evidence that would suggest it so far.
And unless you know what evidence would suggest it, how can you evaluate the evidence? In other words, you must be thinking of the evidence we have compared to some standard in your mind as to what would count as evidence of collusion. So what would count as evidence of collusion?
Yeah, I would know it when I see it.
You would know it when you see it. All right. Well, that is the exact line I was waiting for. Okay, thanks for the call. Listen, I think that whether or not I'm calling people trolls, I think that this sort of ideological commitment to a conclusion before we even really evaluate how we've gotten there is sort of the problem. So I appreciate the call, Mitchell. Thank you very much.
Yeah, David, I really appreciate it as well. I'm a huge fan of your show. I hope I don't get considered as a troll.
No, by no means.
I see the same thing on your side. I feel like a lot of the indictment is just tax evasion and is being connected as a Trump-Russia thing.
Okay, well, we will ultimately see. I'm ready. I mean, I could tell you, like, here's what would convince me that there was collusion. Here's what would convince me that there wasn't. But I think it's important to sort of know that. All right, Mitchell, thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Let's go to our next caller from the, I don't know. How about the 360 area code? Caller from 360, thanks for holding on the line. What's on your mind today?
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Oh, hi. So my name is Matthew, and I have a question regarding the potential impeachment of Donald Trump, specifically that with the current Mueller investigation, his impeachment, or at least the indictment of several of his colleagues, seems inevitable, or at least very likely. So you personally, what would you, I guess, project or speculate the post-impeachment White House looking like, and how that'll affect his voter base and the next two elections in 2018 and 2020?
Yeah, I mean, your question presumes that that 2018 election, which is a year away, will be post-impeachment, and I think that's just not going to happen.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's absolutely, even if we were to have impeachment or more likely resignation, I don't know if you disagree with this, Pat, but I think that there is no chance that it happens in time for it to impact the 2018 election.
I mean, there are people now declaring that there's no chance that Trump will finish out his first term. I don't know how you can come to that conclusion. I think it's more than likely that he will.
I think he will. Yeah, that's the thing. So it's very tough for me to answer the question. I mean, I have said that if there were an impeachment or resignation, that it would sort of depend. What happens next depends on, is Mike Pence so wrapped up in whatever leads to Trump's impeachment or resignation that he also goes? Or does Mike Pence become president of the United States? Pence has been doing a pretty damn good job. His name is basically completely out of all the Trump-Russia stuff, right? I mean, you barely hear anything about Pence, really. But you just don't really hear his name much in the last 6 months in the context of the Trump-Russia investigation. So I think Pence is doing a pretty good job of keeping himself separate from that. And I think the most likely scenario if Trump goes is that Mike Pence becomes president of the United States. The scandal decreases, but the effectiveness of getting ideological right-wing nut jobbery passed goes way up. That's the way I see it, you know? I don't know.
Okay, I don't know how much time I have left, but just as an extension, do you think we would be better off under Pence than we would under Trump?
No, I've been super clear about this. I think the best scenario, given that Trump, Pence are in the White House already, is that Trump stays scandal-ridden, unable to do anything legislatively until Democrats take over the House and Senate in 2018, optimistically maybe 2020, and Trump loses re-election in 2020. I think that's the best scenario, because I think Trump out and Pence in would actually be far worse for America.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate the call. Interesting to get a call asking about what do you think will happen once Trump is impeached because of Trump-Russia, after a call from someone who says there is no Trump-Russia thing going on.
Yeah, very
but I think
segment.
This goes to the ideological diversity of the David Pakman Show audience. And for that, I think we can all be very grateful. Let's take a break. We'll be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, time for audience questions. We've got 3 good ones. First one, I don't know what's going to happen. I predict many, many dislikes, no matter what my answer is to this question. Chris wrote in, and other people have as well. And Chris said, David, where are you on the Sam Seder versus Jimmy Dore debate? Which side are you on? For people who don't know, Sam Seder is the host of the Majority Report podcast, and he's formerly of Air America and MSNBC contributor. Multiple voices he does on Bob's Burgers, etc. Friend of mine. Jimmy Dore is the host of, I think it's the Jimmy Dore Show.
Jimmy Dore Show.
Jimmy Dore Show, which is under the Young Turks umbrella, I believe. And they've been kind of going at it, and they've been going at it for even since before the election. And I think before the election, they debated a Bernie or bust or not. And I think, if I recall correctly, Jimmy Dore was a Bernie or buster, and Sam Seder was not, who said, no, that doesn't really make any sense. That's not a good idea. And they debated there. And then recently they also had another one of these flare-ups, I guess you would call them. And anyway, the left-wing media, particularly online left-wing media, has sort of split up into these different factions. And I think it's totally destructive. And I'm also going to participate in that now by taking a side. So blame me for what I'm criticizing, no doubt. No, listen, if I had to pick a side, I'm on the Sam Seder side. I don't think that would be a surprise to anybody on this. I've been following both. I watch about equal amounts of both Jimmy Dore and Sam Seder. And I think that Sam is doing a completely different type of thing than Jimmy is. I just flat out don't agree with Jimmy with a lot of his, I guess they would be called analyses when it comes to Trump-Russia. I think that he's been going out of his way sort of to almost mock the idea that there is anything there with the Russia story when, listen, we've got multiple indictments. Michael Flynn is on the chopping block. All this crazy stuff is going on, you know? And I also do think that Sam is not doing politics in a way that is destructive to the movement of the left. I question whether Jimmy's brand of politics and the way he does it is actually counterproductive to the left, because I think he and I would probably agree that the Democratic Party does need to move to the left. Like, he and I wouldn't disagree on that. But I think that the approach he takes is one that is actually going to further the divide rather than actually try to fix the problem that the left is dealing with right now.
So when you talk about the split when it comes to progressive talk shows, do you mean the Hillary and Bernie wings? Do you mean the SJW types versus the more free speech absolutists? Do you mean those who believe in and agree with the Russia story versus those who deny it?
I don't think it's one thing, and I think it's bigger than the Democratic Party, because there are elements of the left that are outside the Democratic Party, right? So yes, within the Democratic Party, there's debate as to whether it's Democrats Inc. or do we need a more progressive Democratic Party, et cetera, et cetera. Abundantly clear that public opinion on issues tells us that the Democratic Party does need to move to the left. But there are also people on the left that are outside the Democratic Party who would never consider even voting for a Democrat because they see the party in and of itself as part of the problem. That's not an illegitimate position to take. You can take that position and defend it, and I think that's interesting. I've never been a Democrat, right? I completely respect that point of view, but I don't think it's very easy to characterize it as the authoritarian left versus the non-authoritarian left, or the SJWs versus the non-SJWs, or the regressive left versus the non-regressive, or the Democratic left versus the not in the Democratic. It's all of these things and more, and these issues overlap. And Sam had a very interesting analogy to what he sees as the problem, the difference between him and Jimmy Dore. And Sam said, you know, Jimmy Dore and I could both be out there advocating that, hey, you need water. Water is necessary for life. And I'm advocating for more water. But the difference is Jimmy is offering arsenic-tainted water to people, right? Hey, listen, we're on the same side. We're saying people need the water. But if one of us is offering or selling arsenic-tainted water, then that does not exactly mean that we are on the same page, even though we might have this general umbrella opinion that is the same. And I think that's a pretty good analogy. So, hey, listen, if I'm now in a beef with Jimmy Dore, it makes absolutely no difference to me. That's the thing. I'm just here doing my show. You know what I mean?
You're not worried that you're rolling around in the mud now, along with them?
No, I mean, I am. I'm absolutely rolling around in the mud. But that's been a problem we've been dealing with on the show for a while, right? No matter what stories we do, we're rolling around in the mud because we're doing the wrong stories according to someone. But the beautiful thing is, Sam can do his show, and Jimmy can do his show, and I can do my show. And if we don't want, none of us have to watch each other's shows or ever talk about them, unless we choose to. Very good. All right. Thanks, Chris. Zara wrote in, what irrational or dumb thing does society at large see as normal? I have some thoughts on this, and I'm just picking a couple things. What about spending insane amounts of money on weddings? Like, I really don't get that. I do not understand how that has been normalized. Being busy all the time and actually bragging about how busy one is. I think that that is a weird thing that society sees as normal. Working 80 hours a week in American work culture, I think that that's crazy that it's been normalized. And it's sort of related, bragging about how little you sleep. And our president does this. He brags about just how little he sleeps. And the entire thing where it's become a badge of honor or normalized to talk about how busy you are, how much you're working, and how little you sleep, that should be seen as really concerning. Like when someone says, I only sleep 6 hours a night and work 80 hours a week, it shouldn't be, wow, that's really something to be applauded. The reaction should be, oh, you need an intervention now, because that's a huge problem.
Yeah, there's a big focus on that. I think that really applies to people in the United States more so than around the world.
I agree.
But when you talk about spending too much on weddings, I think you can say the same thing for funerals too.
Oh,
the average cost of a funeral is maybe $10,000, and you're able to charge that much because it's like the one time where people don't really care about how much they're spending.
This is why, well, two things on this. Number one, I have a good friend who's an estate planning attorney. He says, make it very clear in your will, what you do and don't want. Like, say, I want the simplest available casket, if that's what you want, because in times of grief, I'm not suggesting funeral directors are using aggressive sales techniques. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that in a time of grief, if you start being offered different options by a funeral director, oftentimes people will say, in the absence of clear directive from the deceased family member or friend, they will say, oh, I feel kind of guilty if I go with the cheapest thing, so I'll just like pick the middle thing.
You want to
or whatever.
glorify them, right?
Yeah, so you might be in a situation where, through no fault of anybody other than the circumstances, you end up spending a lot more. And this is one area where I think that that Judaism has it right, which is simple pine casket, period.
Huh.
That's it. No,
Okay.
no gilded stuff, and no.
Well, what about cremation, though? Wouldn't that be cheaper?
Yeah.
Is it cheaper?
Well, I know a lot of Jews who get cremated, yeah. And I don't know religiously what the deal is with that. But yes, cremation is also an option. But if someone's wishes are to be buried, then simple casket. Yeah, spending that a crazy amount on funerals doesn't make sense. The other thing is arguing with people on social media, right? The idea that it's seen as normal to engage in these absolutely unhinged, wild arguments on social media, who, by the way, I don't know anybody who's had an awakening other than maybe Megan Phelps Roper, interestingly enough, former Westboro Baptist Church member she actually met her husband through social media, someone who was trying to challenge some of her beliefs. But by and large, consuming hours of your day engaging in these social media arguments, the fact that that's seen as normal by a significant part of society is odd to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to argue about politics with like your friends and family because you're interacting with these people every day, just about.
In more than 140 characters.
Right, and on social media, you don't know who these people are. They could be halfway across the world, and you'll never see them in your entire life.
Last one, most of the driving I see in Boston, the fact that it's considered to be normal by a lot of Bostonians, 90% of the driving I see is outrageous, and clearly some people consider it normal because it's getting worse, not better.
I'm all about the excessive use of the horn, though, myself.
Yeah, I know. It's gotten really, really bad here. All right, those are some of my ideas. Jenny wrote in, hey, David, can you address the controversy about whether chili is a soup? I have very strong feelings on this.
Of course.
Chili is not a soup. Chili is a stew, and when you say, here's the most direct way to get me to this. If you say to someone, do you want some soup? And then they say, oh, what kind of soup do you have? Oh, the type of soup I have is chili. You don't hear that conversation because chili is not under the category of soup. It is a stew. Okay. And I read online that it's broth related, right? When I was where if there's broth, then it's a soup. Well, number one, depending on how you make your chili, it doesn't really have broth. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But if the idea that pieces of food in liquid is a soup, that means cereal is a soup. Because after all, you're putting grains inside of liquid. Well, and nobody would say that cereal is a soup. So merely the idea of solid food in liquid being a soup is wrong, and cereal proves the case.
I do agree with you on this one, and I think it has to do with the fact that you put already cooked meats inside of it, so that makes it a stew. If you were to cook it all together, then you would create this like chicken broth or like beef broth, and that would make it a soup.
Excuse me, vegan intervention, if I may. I don't know if you've ever made a meat-based chili, but the meat's not pre-cooked. What are you talking about?
It's not pre-cooked?
No. I mean, you might put it in early with the onions and the tomato paste, but the meat's not pre-cooked. I don't know what kind of chili Pat's ever seen. You know what? Let's go, because this is Keurig scandal multiplied by 10. Pre-cooked meat makes chili not a soup.
Can I say something else?
I would revise and extend your statements.
I think. Well, no, I'll just forget about it. I think soups are predominantly liquid.
Okay, so you're sticking with that.
I'm sticking with it.
I actually don't think that that's the strongest argument, but it's one that often comes up. But I believe that chili is a meal in and of itself. It is not a soup, and that's it. I just don't see much of an argument of it. But if anybody has ever heard of these pre-cooked meat chilies that Pat is referencing, by all means send in an email, because I've
never heard of it. You don't cook the meat and then add it in later?
No, you don't.
You don't like fry it up or something?
You don't.
Is that what you do with meat?
You don't. I've never seen that done with chili. It all gets cooked in the same pot. You want to brown the meat along with the onions and garlic in the bottom of the pot. I think that it's true that there's probably a cheap way to do it, which is you buy already cooked something. I don't even know what it would be, but I just get ground turkey and a couple turkey sausages, and then you put them in, and then they cook while the chili's cooking. Okay, chili, not a soup, no doubt about it. Send me your thoughts. Great bonus show today. We're out of time. Sign up at davidpakman.com/membership, patreon.com/davidpakmanshow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.